Tonight I want to talk to you about maximising meat quality, and particularly I want to talk about maximising beef quality. Over the next 15 minutes, I'm going to be on the front foot, and I'm going to start the discussion by saying, what's the problem? And that's a standard way of starting a conversation in my house, but what's the problem? And I'm hoping with 120 people in here tonight, that somebody's going to say, eating quality. And then, because that nicely leads me on to what is meat eating quality. I'm going to talk about consumers and why they're important, how the supply chain affects meat eating quality, what can farmers do to influence meat eating quality, and what can we do to change or to improve meat quality for you guys so that you get a bit more money in your pocket. Okay, what's the problem? During the last 15 years, our food research scientists working in AFBI have been interested in beef eating quality. And the results presented tonight, or the data presented tonight, are a result of a large consumer study looking at the results from 15,000 consumers eating roughly 800 carcasses, 18 muscles, in over 5 countries. And the graph presented just in front of you is actually a snapshot of the results that we've obtained. And they show that half of the steak that's eaten with regards to the strip loin, half of that steak is good or every day. So if you're sitting down on a Tuesday or Wednesday night, that's the type of steak that you'll be getting, okay? Small amounts of the steak that have been eaten are actually premium. That's the lowest amount of the categories that we looked at. But most alarmingly is the figure in red. And that's 20% of sirloins that are being eaten at the minute are unsatisfactory to the consumer. So that's 1 in 5. So if you have 5 people around your house, statistically speaking, one of them is going to get a tough steak or a flavourless steak. That figure doesn't bode well for those that are buying promotional meat, coming in on the meat promotions and the retailers, because grilled rump, 25% of that is actually unsatisfactory. And if you're sitting down on a Sunday to a roast topside, you're 54% of roast topside is unsatisfactory to the consumer. So those figures beg the question, is this a sustainable for an expensive product? And beef is an expensive and a luxurious product. So what are we going to do? So we've asked about what the problem is. What is beef eating quality? Or what is meat quality? Now, whether you like it or not, everybody in the audience tonight is some sort of food expert. We all know what we like when we see a piece of beef, and we know what we don't like. Meat eating quality or beef eating quality largely looks at these three. The first three, I'm sort of talking because there's another room in next door. The 3 on the left attributes. So this is looking at tenderness, flavour, and juiciness. So nobody has sat down to a steak and not commented on whether it was tender, it had flavour, it was juicy, or it was cardboard, it was the best they ever had. Other attributes look at appearance, sort of how much marbling was there, did you have too much fat, did it look right, what was the colour of it going into the pan if you're cooking it yourself. Nutritional quality, and that's something that's big interest now where people that are looking at flexitarian diets, what's the nutritional quality of beef? And shelf life. This is something for retailers as well, and that looking at, can they get second shelf? Can they get second weekend on shelf? So how do we measure that? Well, we measure it by looking at consumer responses. So we get everybody in a room and we give them steak and we ask them what to think of it. Do they like the flavour? Do they like the aroma? Do they like the tenderness? And we culminate all of that together in some sort of statistical package and relay the results. Instrumental analysis we have back in the labs in Belfast. We can look at how much force is required. We have a machine that looks at how much force is required to slice a piece of steak. So it mimics a tooth bite. We have an instrumental analysis to look at the chemical compounds that are present in the steaks, naturally present, that produce flavour. Okay? And we look at other things like fatty acids and whatnot. The information from that gives us, our summaries are that meat eating quality is inconsistent. We know that there are many factors that affect the meat eating quality, so that's a good thing. But we also know that the current grading systems, the systems that are paying you your wage, don't actually reward meat quality. There's nothing there. There's a slight affiliation with muscle or the Europe system and eating quality, but largely it doesn't predict. So I've mentioned consumers. And I want to focus on consumers because these are the people that are important to us. And what I've shown here is a blown up, very oversimplified version of the supply chain. What we have here, we start on the left-hand side with a farmer. He produces his beef. You guys produce your beef. That goes to the abattoir. The abattoir will sell it to a retailer, whether that's Tesco's or Sainsbury's or others, or into a restaurant. That's then eaten, and there's a bill at the end of the day. That bill then pays for the restaurant pays the abattoir, and the abattoir pays the farmer. Now, it's not up to me to define what you guys get. I want you guys to get as much as you can. But what you realize from this simple diagram of the supply chain is that all the money comes from consumers. So if you get the consumer on site, there should be more money. So what's going on in consumers' heads? A recent study looking at research papers that have been published in the last 10 years have highlighted a number of attributes that consumers think about. And somebody had asked previously about Brazilian beef, and somebody had said in the previous room, we really need to champion the fact that it's our beef, we're producing it here. And origin, good for you guys, origin comes out as what? This is the top thing that consumers look for. Unfortunately, on the flip side of that is they also look for price, okay? So I noticed a couple of people who have said, well, you're talking about price as well. But there are a number of things that farmers can also do, and they can influence how much fat is there, how much flavor is there actually. They can look after animal welfare systems, production systems, organic systems. They can actually look after tenders. They can contribute to an awful lot on this and contribute to an awful lot of what consumers are thinking about. If you look at the meat quality and supply chain, where meat quality is affected, I said in the farmers, you have genetics, nutrition, husbandry. In the haulier, we have animal welfare, something that a previous speaker talked about, the importance of not having a stressed animal. That actually also applies to the meat eating quality. What happens, and I'll show later on, what happens when you stress an animal out before slaughter. An awful lot can happen in the abattoir, as you well know. The retailer, actually, the packaging that you put a piece of meat into can affect how tender it is. It can affect the appearance of it. And then, of course, once you've got all that right, you can give it to a consumer, and then they either can cook it right or cook it wrong. And that's really showing you where we can actually improve eating quality and have an adverse effect on it. What I want to focus on tonight is the producer and the haulier, because we're full of producers tonight. So if we look at this slide and we can see what can the farmer do, the farmer can actually do quite a lot. He or she can influence the breed, the sex, the genetics, the age and maturity, the diet, and the stress of the animals that are going for slaughter or being produced. If you look at breed, sex, and genetics, and age and maturity, that actually has a direct impact on the tenderness, the flavorness, and juiciness of the meat that you produce. Diet affects all four. And stress affects tenderness, flavors, and juiciness. So you would think there, if you guys are producing this meat, you can actually do an awful lot to the value of that, the eating quality of that meat. Some results, and I'm realizing that I'm in a room full of beef farmers, and maybe you mightn't like these results, but they are results, and they are statistically sound. And what we looked at was the eating quality by breed. And what we have on the yellow line are the eating quality of continental cattle. We had Blonde, Aquitaine, we had Simmental, and Limousin. On the right-hand side are all dairy, so they're all Holsteins. What we have on the left-hand side, these are the mean scores for consumer studies, and we're assigning scores to aroma liking, tenderness, juiciness, flavor, overall liking. And you can see clearly that dairy beef comes out tops for all of those sensory attributes. We have a thing here on the far right called MQ4. I'll speak about that later. That's actually how you would score the beef that was eaten in this study or studied or consumed in this study, how it would be marked on an alternative grading system called Meat Standards Australia, MSA. It's a grading system that pays farmers on the value of the meat and not on confirmation and fat class. Somebody asked earlier, what's the ideal age to kill a cattle out or for meat quality? This study looked at sex and maturity. And you can quite clearly see that steers score highest for all of our attributes that we're looking at. Bulls aren't far off, but unfortunately it's bad news for the eating quality of our cow meat. Okay? And that people would understand that. If you look at the MQ4 system, this is how an alternative grading system would look at your meat. You can see that steers come out top as well. Okay? Now, I don't want to sit here. I'm very aware of the time. But what we can do in AFBI is take all of the results and produce them on a graph like this. So I'm going to take a minute to tell you all about external preference mapping. An external preference mapping is a way of gathering up all your observations, all your analyses, and firing them onto one page. And seeing, using statistical methods, seeing where your treatments, where your breeds, where your sex, where your maturity, where your processing treatments all lie on that page. And what we can see is that, okay, we've got an X and a Y axis. So going from right to left, we're actually explaining 50% of the variation within our data set. And from left to right, from right to left, we have tenderness going to toughness. So expressing the importance of tenderness as an eating quality attribute. And then slightly askew from the vertical line, we have sour flavor going up to sweet flavors. And what I don't want to go into an awful lot of this, but what really, if you look at this graph later on in your books, what you'll find out is this bottom right corner, as you look at it, is the sweet spot. It has the intensity of flavor, it has the texture, the tenderness, and these are all attributes, and these are all things that people talk about whenever they're eating the meat. This is how they describe it: beefy flavor, intensity, aftertaste. What you don't want is to be up on the opposite, top left. Okay, so you have spongy, fibrous. This WBSF is the shear force method that I talked about, one of the instruments we had, and it measures toughness in meat. Okay? And what you can also see is the little green and yellow dots, and they actually were the treatments in the cattle that we looked at. And what we can do is, if we move the diagram on, we can split the diagram into cows, bulls, and steers. So it agrees with the previous graphs that we showed. But quite controversially, is we can draw a purple line down between the sets of data, and we have all our continental on the left-hand side and all our dairy breed on the right-hand side. So the best eating quality were these T3B and T4B, and they're dairy breed. So it's controversial tonight, but those are the results. And there are results in scientific literature that backs up those findings. What about nutrition? There's an awful lot of people ask about fatty acids, and there's a lot of people talking about omega-3, and people are steering away from beef because it doesn't have omega-3. What the farmer can do, we all know that beef is a rich source of protein. It has certain vitamins and minerals, and what we find out, there are fatty acids. Of course, there's fatty acids present there, but there's large amounts of omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. And as a rough guide to how healthy the meat being produced from the farmer and coming into the retail shop is this method here, this measurement here of N6. It's on the y-axis of the graph that you see. It's N6 to N3. So the amount of omega-6 divided by the amount of omega-3. Now, ideally, for the most healthy purposes, you want that to be as low as possible. So how can farmers help with that? Well, what you see here in D1, diet 1, is actually grass. So if you want your N6, N3 ratio to be as low as possible, produce the healthiest meat that you can, grass feeding is the way to go. Concentrate feeding just happens to be D2. Okay? I mentioned, and it had been mentioned previously, and previous speakers have talked about the importance of not having a stressed animal. That goes forward into post-slaughter. Post-slaughter, there are various processes that happen as the muscle in the animal, the living animal, turns into the meat in the carcass. And one of those processes is pH drop. And abattoirs and producers are very concerned about what the pH drop and the temperature drop and what that profile actually is. If you, in a case where you have normal pH drop, you'll have a pH, this is the acidity of the meat, is about 5.69 units. So this is a picture here of a normal steak, and it's one that Francis actually donated about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Okay, so it presents a nice colored steak that you would see that you'd be happy to buy. DFD, or stressed meat, so stress actually causes a condition called DFD, dark, firm, and dry. And what you end up getting is a purple colored meat that has color defects, it has texture defects when you eat it, it's not nice to eat, it has poor flavor, and it has poor shelf life. Because of its high pH, it's closer to natural pH, and it's more likely to spoil. So you will never get a 28-day-old steak, dry or wet-aged steak out of this material. The important message for farmers is that it reduces the value. In a lot of cases where you find DFD in the loin, the entire carcass is downgraded. Okay, so the importance of stress leading up to slaughter and reducing that stress can't be stressed enough. Pardon the pun. Finally, we've talked an awful lot tonight about meat quality and what's important, and I've sort of inferred that Europe doesn't really deliver for meat eating quality. So there's never, I was always told, never come with a problem unless you've got some sort of solution. And what we can do is, let's look at other alternative grading systems. And one of the grading systems that we had a look at about 10 years ago, was MSA, Meat Standards Australia. And it's a grading system that rewards cuts, not carcass. And from that, what we do, to make this work, we take information such as the age, the sex, the breed, all the stuff that we've been talking about previously, husbandry, lairage, stimulation, these all happen in the abattoir. And all that information is fed into a computer model. That then gives an output of the predicted eating quality of the beef that is produced. It gives you ideal conditioning time, whether you want to age that for 21 days or it would be better going for 28, or at 14, go get it out into the shop. It gives you eating quality on cut and preferred cooking method for what you've bought. The steaks that are produced, or the cuts that are produced, are also scored on premium, better than every day and unsatisfactory. So you know that if you have an event coming up and you have people coming around to the house and you want to impress the mother-in-law or something like that, you go for the premium. If you're Wednesday night steak, it might be every day or better than every day, depending on how well you're doing, okay, or what time of the month, if you get paid or not. And what we have shown is in 2003 and 2007, we actually carried out an adaptation of MSA. So this was, as I say, in Australia. We carried it out in Northern Ireland. Obviously, some of the inputs here don't correlate with what we gather in Northern Ireland, and we found that it actually did work. So that's something that there is a viable alternative to what you have. Unfortunately, it was not taken up. You'll notice the dates, 2003, 2008. There was a bit of an economic crisis from 2008, and a debate still out whether we've come over that. But the information is there, and it does work. So take-home messages from tonight. Beef eating quality, there is inconsistencies in eating quality across the beef sector. Many factors affect that eating quality, but farmers can help. You guys can help. Current grading systems don't reward that, but there are possible solutions. One could be MSA that would deliver for the consumers, get them eating a bit more beef. And it would also, let's look at value-based payments for farmers, giving them a lot of people talking about getting a wee bit more money or a lot more money. So let's look at value-based farmers. So really, it just leaves me to thank you for listening tonight. I'd like to thank everybody for staying on, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them. All right.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you.